My first and only real memory of my biological father as a young child was we were standing at the top of the stairs. Now, my brother was on one side, he was holding my hand, my mother was holding my other hand, and she had my little sister in her arms. And we said goodbye to Daddy, and he got in the car and left, a mother saying, "Wave goodbye to your father." Well, that was the last time I ever seen my father. He just drove off. I'll get into a little bit more of sort of life without Dad as I go along. But I did get to meet him, and he did come back into my life later on in my life. We had a basic childhood, I suppose, really. My mother was a single mother with 3 small children. We did apparently live in a house that my grandmother supplied to us. My mother rented. I don't really know the details. But the first recollection that I have of my stepfather coming into my life was we were out in the backyard playing, and my mother was talking to this man over the fence. And I remember we'd go up and, try to interrupt and want something, and she'd just tell us, go away, go and play. And so we did, because we always had to do as we were told. The day that my older brother went to school, I was devastated. I wanted to go to school with him. I just idolised my older brother, but I was too young. I wasn't allowed to go. So I remember for a week, every day when he'd leave to go to school, I'd climb under my bed and I'd cry all day until he'd come home. But as he learnt stuff at school, he would come home and he would teach me. I remember him teaching me how to write my initials. And when he'd go to school, I'd practice writing my initials all the time until I got it right, till I could show him what I'd learnt every day. He was pretty tough on me, but he'd say to Reddy, you've got to write on the lines, you've got to write on the lines. So I used to practice all the time to get these darn lines straight. The next time I remember this man, I was out of bed. It was late at night. I don't know why I was out of bed. My mother was in the bath and I heard a knock on the door, and I went to the bathroom door and said there was somebody knocking at the door, and she said, go and ask who it was. So I did, and then I went back and told her, and then she said, okay, then let him in. So I let him in, and I sat there sort of looking at him, talking to him, I suppose, until my mother got out of the bath. And then when she got out of the bath, of course, I was put off into bed and I went to sleep. As this man came into our life, I remember having a very real dream of like a big black bat devil kind of thing outside my bedroom window, and it was trying to get in, and its wings were flapping and it was squawking, and I was horrified. That I remember trying to scream, but my voice, nothing would come out. Now, dreams mean something. This man was the devil. As this man came into our life, and he actually moved in to live with us, we moved from the house where we were living in, which was my grandmother's house, to another house not far away. Now, I don't really know why we moved, whether it was my grandparents weren't going to supply a house for a man as well. I have no idea. That's not my thing to get into. Or it could have just been because of the arguments they had, because we moved around a lot because the arguments were violent. So we moved out of my grandparents' house to this other little house, but they still lived not far away from us. And I just want to touch on a very small memories that I have of my grandfather when I was young. I remember he was a funny man. I did love to spend time with my grandfather. Not that we got much time to spend with him because he wasn't around for very long. He passed away when I was really young. But he used to have this beautiful, polished bronze car, and we weren't allowed to touch it. We weren't allowed to open the door handle. We weren't allowed to do anything. And when we were put in the car to go somewhere, we had to sit up straight like little soldiers and not move anywhere in case we damaged his car. But he'd make us laugh all the time. He was a funny man, my grandfather. I did get to meet my biological father's parents. Once, I only remember them once. They came to the house and it was coming up to Christmas time or something when we were very young. And I don't think my stepfather was there at this point in time. And they brought us some Christmas presents and we, sat and talked to them. Mother wouldn't let us open them when they were there, so we never got to open them. And then they left and Mother said, oh no, we've got to put these away for Christmas time. But she never ever gave us those presents. We were never allowed to have them from my biological father's parents. And I thought that was really mean for little kids. A real nasty person. She used to tell us kids all the time that she never wanted to have kids. It was all my father. And then she gave him us 3 kids and then he ran away and left us and didn't want us. And she used to tell us all the same things about my grandparents and my cousins, that my grandmother didn't want to see us. We were the horrible kids from the bush and the bastard kids from the bush, she used to tell us actually. And that, none of our cousins wanted to see us and things. And the horrible things she used to say about my father was, and I knew they weren't true. I always knew they weren't true. And Dad clarified those things as we met and got to know one another later on in life. One night when they were in the middle of an argument in their small house, she came in and said, come on you kids, pack your things, you're all going into a home. Well, I knew what a home meant because she'd told me about it all the time. And I was excited. I was going to be with the other kids and I ran in my room and threw things in my bag and my brother's there saying, what are you doing that for, Loretta? We're not going. I said, come on, quick, pack your things. We're going. And I was excited. I was going to be out of there. One night a couple of times actually, while we were in this little house, my grandfather had passed away by this time. I do remember that. But my parents were in a huge argument and us kids were screaming and crying. Well, one of the neighbours came over. I don't know whether it was the guy next door or I think this guy actually lived across the road. He was a nice man. He came over to check to see if everything was all right. And my stepfather met him at the door and said, yeah, everything's all right, and he sort of hesitantly went away. Well, a little while after that, on a different day, they were in a huge argument again and the same thing was happening again. And this man came over again. And this time, my mother met him at the door. And I think one of us kids, I don't know which one it was. Well, anyway, he actually took us out of the house and he took us over to my grandmother's house and we stayed there the night. And then we went back the next day, obviously. And this happened another time with this man. He came and got us out of the house and took us away. I think that was the reason that we were moved out into the country where people couldn't hear us anymore and they'd worn out their welcome there. So we were looking at moving away out of this little house and we were moving out into the country. But a little while before we did, we went out to visit some friends of theirs, my parents who were out that way, lived only a couple of doors down from where this house was. And on our way out there, my stepfather had been drinking quite a large amount and he turned around an island in Capalaba actually and drove straight in front of another car. And of course this car hit us. It hit the driver's side. Now my brother sat on that side, my sister in the middle, and then there was me. when the car impact hit him, he hit my sister hit me, and my eye went in the door of the car, the old-fashioned lock that used to sit up on the door of the car. Well, that went into my eye. And anyway, he got out and talked to this man and told him that, I'm just going to park the car over here. But he never just parked the car over there. He got back in the car and he took off out. And we had a long drive to go out into the country. And he's screaming at my brother to hold the door closed. And then my mother's half climbed over into the back seat, screaming at him, trying to get the door closed. My brother was only little. It was hard for him to hold that door closed. And we had a long, fast drive out into the country where we were going. So it was a pretty horrific trip. We were all hurt. We were all crying. But they just kept going. They had to get out of the way. And when we got out there, I remember them parking the car under the bushes and sort of hiding it so nobody could see it, and then dragging us kids out of there. We were out there for a few days. No help. Nobody, they never took us to the doctors or had us. So the only thing they gave us kids to help with the pain or whatever. Now, my brother's arm was hurt pretty bad. It wasn't broken or anything, but it was awfully bruised and he couldn't move it and his ribs were sore and he probably cracked his ribs. I don't know. But the only thing we were ever given to dull our pain, because they didn't have kids Panadol back then, was the old-fashioned pink Bex powders.